A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim. And listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, it's just going to be a bit of an exhortation, something comforting, and just in regards to, for brothers who may not have, a woman or a wife, going through a period of not having one can be a tremendous spiritual benefit to you, because it forces you, it forces you essentially to constantly look inward and fix certain things, and look at ourselves, examine ourselves, right? Because if there's anything, just observing, when you observe the culture, the Babylon, the great culture, this American culture, it's constant pleasure. It's constant pleasure, always in your face, right? You open Instagram, you see it. You open TikTok, turn on TV, Netflix, whatever social media you consume, you're constantly, you see it, right? So, that being said, when you don't have one, it can be a tremendous spiritual benefit, to you, because it forces you to look more inward, and it forces you to address certain things that we probably we're ignoring, because if anything, sometimes with a woman it comes with distraction, right? So I just wanted to flow, just address a couple things, right? The first point I kind of wanted to address, it forces us to have, to remember, like we say, like in it says in Baruch, in the land of their captivity we remember ourselves, right? So in being in captivity, we're remembering, ourselves. We're remembering, that we messed up, and essentially acknowledging our offense and hoping the Lord, pretty much, would have mercy upon us, like it says in I think it's Habakkuk, the 3rd chapter, where it goes into to basically to have mercy. I heard thy speech and was afraid, right? So remember mercy, to roughly paraphrase, right? So that's pretty much the first point I wanted to hit, is we're put in a situation where we're remembering our creator, right? So I want to start off with that here in Ecclesiastes 12:1, and it says, remember now thy creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, and the years draw nigh, and when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. So we're in a situation where we're remembering, the Lord, in the time of, as young men, so to speak, right? We're in a situation where we're remembering, and essentially also acknowledging, our offense. And it's like it says in Sirach, the 17th chapter, where striving to offend less, so to speak, rather than constantly trying to transgress, right? And what is sin? Sin is transgression of the law, right? So we're remembering, okay, man, we're in this situation, because the Lord, the Lord used these other nations, especially Esau, to punish us, right? So, we're remembering our creator. We're remembering, what is essentially pleasing unto the Heavenly Father, right? Remembering what is what makes us look more adorned, right? We're trying to, have that wisdom shine upon us. You know what I'm saying? The scriptures say that wisdom is the principal thing, right? So, and that starts with essentially having a fear of the Lord, right? So that is the first point, I wanted to hit, when you don't, essentially have a woman, you're kind of forced to, is really about more about strengthening the relationship, you know, through our Lord and Savior Yahushua, right? Um, the next one I wanted to, grab here. This is in James chapter 4, verse 8. And it says, draw nigh to the Most High Yahweh Bashim Shai, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners. And what cleans us is essentially is the word, right? How wherewithal, how shall a young man cleanse his way? Is by taking heed to the word, right? And the Lord comes in the volume of the book. So we're just learning how to become more pure, become more clean, right? And go through your moments of tribulation and so on and so forth. We go through different moments where it's essentially it's a fiery trial, right? But there's always a peaceable fruit that comes out of it. Like it says in Hebrews, no chastening is really joyous, but it is always some peaceable fruit. There's always some type of lesson, that is acquired, and that you can acquire, I should say, out of certain situations that you go through. It says here, continuing on, cleanse your hands, ye sinners, purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Be afflicted and mourn and weep, and let your laughter be turned into mourning, and your joy into heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up, right? So we're essentially, going back to the first point, we're in the house of mourning because we understand that we transgressed, right? But, ultimately, we want to have a healthier relationship, with Yahweh Bashim Shai, right? So the Lord can basically, remember us, in times of trouble, right? Kind of like when you read in that story, what's that story? With Daniel, and the Lord pretty much, he sent the prophet Habakkuk to send him some food. And as a matter of fact, let me just, I'll read it real quick. It's just like maybe like 1 or 2 verses. I forget how Daniel said it, but it was just interesting, just him being in that situation, and then the Lord, pretty much, came through for him, right? This is the Bell and the Dragon, verse 36, points in 38, and it says, and the angel of the Lord took him by the crown and bare him by the hair on his head, and through the vehemency of his spirit set him in Babylon over the den. And it says, and Habakkuk cried and saying, O Daniel, take the dinner which the Most High hath sent thee. And Daniel said, Thou hast remembered me, O Yahweh Bashim Shai, neither hast thou forsaken them that seek thee and love thee, right? So it's not a lot of people, when you really think about it, there's not really a lot of our people that actually have a mindset of seeking the Lord, right? Especially when you see, like I read in the first verse, the first precept, seeing all these things come into pass. When you see all these different things that are playing out on the planet Earth, there, a lot of our people, what our people really lack is a certain kind of urgency, because they think their comforts are strongly tied to this world, right? Their possessions, and a woman is also a possession, right? Is so strongly tied to this world where they feel like there is no need for them to actually acknowledge their offense, right? I'll read that again, and it says, and Daniel said, and thou hast remembered me, O Yahweh Bashim Shai, and neither hast thou forsaken them that seek thee and love thee, right? So essentially was seeking the Lord, in a time where he may be found, right? So the next point I wanted to hit is in 2 Timothy, and pretty much the second point, when you don't have one, right? It forces you to address certain things, and work on certain things about yourself, right? So, and when you do those things, you become a lot more profitable. You become a lot more, resourceful, more useful, you know, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you become a lot more, I don't know. That's basically what I'm trying to say. You become a lot more spiritually, profitable, right? This is Second Timothy. As a matter of fact, let me get the word profitable. At 10, 1 second. This is profitable in the etymon line, and it says here, yielding spiritual and or moral benefit, useful. It says advantageous, expedient, helpful, money making, right? Yahushua said he was about his father's business, right? So when you do these things and essentially you purge yourself of certain things, you become a lot more like, you become a lot more profitable, because then you can use that exhortation when you purge yourself of certain things to be able to comfort, another, right? You're able to strengthen thy brethren, like it says in Luke, right? So this is Second Timothy 2 verse 21. And it says here, if a man therefore purge himself of these, he shall be a vessel unto honor, sanctified, and meet for the master's use, and prepared unto every good work. Flee youthful lust, and follow righteousness, faith, charity, peace with them that call on the Lord with a pure heart, right? So, when you purge yourself of like certain things that were probably like bugging you and they were affecting you, you learn to practice some more temperance. You learn to practice more self-control. You learn to kind of basically go without for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Or even, if you can, even with lawful things, you tend to go without for a little bit of while, because, certain things are even lawful that we can do, right? But maybe doing too much of it might be too much of a hindrance. So you might decide, okay, let me cut back. Let me trim let me practice more temperance, right? I don't need to overindulge in this as much as I used to, right? So it makes you and kind of frees you up more to be more profitable and focus on other things that might actually spiritually benefit you, right? Because in this kingdom, there's a constant bombardment of like flesh, pleasing your flesh everywhere, right? And even Apostle Paul, he even touches on this, because like as a matter of fact, I'll jump to that. Because we go through those moments where we're like wrestling back and forth. Romans 7. Hold on. Romans 7 and 18, and it says, for I know in that in me, that is my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me, and how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I do not. But the evil which I would not, that I do. Right? So you might go through some moments, and in each brother, if you that varies depending on the type of thing that kind of irritates you, and you kind of want to overindulge, your flesh wants to overindulge in this particular thing, right? That's a constant tug, and that's a constant back and forth, right? That's the thing that you don't want to do it, but it just feels good, because it's pleasing to the flesh, right? Continuing on here, and it says, for the will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I would, uh, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Right. So there's always that constant tug back and forth, between the spirit and the flesh, right? And the scriptures talk about how the corruptible body, it presseth down the soul and it weigheth down the mind, right? So, when you purge yourself of certain things, right, or even cut back on even certain things that might be even lawful as well, then it helps you, it helps to free up your mind a lot more spiritually, so you're not constantly being bombarded, by particular things. You might switch up a routine, right? Because it's when you it's really it's warfare, right? You remember Esau he's a very calculating type of person, so he puts pleasure everywhere, anything that can affect your senses, right? Whether it's the food, the content that the content that you look at, it's on the TV, it's in the media, so on and so forth, right? This is the type of enemy that you're dealing with. He really gets at your senses. When you think about, for example, when you think about that event that happened a couple of years ago, and how to get people to take the syringe, if you know what I'm saying, he tied it to pleasure, right? You couldn't travel anymore, or you couldn't dine at open, at the front at restaurants anymore, or you couldn't fly to different countries anymore. He's always tying it to flesh, right? So when you don't have one, when you don't have a woman, you're able to kind of, it forces you to look more inwardly, right, and address certain things, that we probably were neglecting, right? So you're a lot more, think of it like this, look at it, because as young men, sometimes, we're burning. So, but at the same time, look at not having one more as an opportunity rather than looking at it as a burden. Look at it as an opportunity, but don't look at it as a burden. An opportunity to address certain things that would make you more profitable, that would make you more desirable. You know what I'm saying? So, okay, let me go here. I guess I'll end off in Ecclesiasticus. Okay, Ecclesiasticus chapter 39, verse 1, and I'll just jump down to 5. And it says here, but he that giveth his mind to the law of the Most High, and is occupied in the meditation thereof, will seek up the wisdom of all the ancient, and be occupied in prophecies, right? So we occupy ourselves in understanding what's going on. We're not ignorant of anything that's great or small, right? And even seeking out the wisdom, because that's one of the things that our people lack, really and truly, is wisdom, like I said before. And another thing I also wanted to even mention as well, when it comes to wisdom, when you look at the ways of our forefathers, especially a lot of the ones that walked more very uprightly, you know what I'm saying, their presence, them as an individual, their value wasn't tied to them having a woman. It was strongly tied to their closeness to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, right? And I use this example of Joseph all the time, right? So, and then you think about it, and I'll use this as an example, actually, because, something that Yahushai said, that how foxes have dens, but the Son of Man doesn't have a place to lay his head, to roughly paraphrase. But yet for all, he was very well sought after, because how is it you can say something, like that, and then, you have a woman that all she wants to do is touch your clothing. That woman, that woman that had an infirmity, and all she wanted to do was grab onto Yahushai's clothing, right? So Yahushai definitely was a man of value, right? So remembering these things, that man, wisdom maketh a man's face to shine. That's pretty much the point I'm trying to, hit the nail on the head here, right? Verse 5, and it says, he will give his heart to resort early to the Lord that made him, and will pray before the Most High, and will open up the mouth in prayer and make a supplication for his sins, right? So I guess that kind of circles back to the first point, making a supplication, because we understand that, we've transgressed against our power, right? And we're just making an effort, for the Lord to have, essentially have mercy upon us in these times, right? So, that's pretty much the point. I didn't want to make the lesson too long, but this is just a kind of comfort. When you don't have a woman, it can be a very good opportunity, of self-development, for you, right? Not to look at it as a burden, but look at it as an opportunity, to work more on yourself, right? So, anyways, Lord's will. This lesson was quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.